Now that we've had several good hard freezes throughout the state and we're getting well into the winter, it may be a good idea to get out and mulch your strawberries. Now, we mulch strawberries in Oklahoma primarily for the reason to protect them somewhat from the alternating warm and cold temperatures in the spring. So we want to be sure that we have had several good hard freezes and that the berries have really gone dormant, because we're not really all that concerned about extremely cold temperatures, but alternating warming and cooling temperatures, as I mentioned. By mulching the strawberries at this time of the year, then, we will give them somewhat of a protection through those days in February and March when we have some warm days, and hopefully keep them from coming out quite so early in the spring. So that's a real good reason for mulching, just to hold them back some in the spring to keep them from coming out too early. And then also, of course, we mulch to help hold in any type of moisture that we may get through the winter time, so they don't dry out if we run into a series of really dry days like we had earlier in the winter this year. Now, the type of mulch that we use on strawberries is really important also. You want to use a good, clean, light, airy mulch. Something like clean wheat straw that we're using here, or oat straw, or another straw from a small grain is an ideal type of mulch. One that is weed-free, and hopefully some that's weathered a little bit so that you won't have a lot of seeds in there. You do not want to use a really tight mulch or one that will compact to any great degree, such as grass clippings, for example, because this will have a tendency to pack over the berries and could smother them somewhat and cause you some damage. Then as we get into the springtime, then probably about mid to late March, depending on where you are in the state, earlier in the south but later in the northern part of the state, you will come in and rake the mulch back, and you'll be able to notice, of course, that the berries have begun to grow back and have some green showing in there, and that's the time to bring your mulch off. Then as you take the mulch off in the spring, though, just rake it over to the side of the row and let it lay there, because if we do have a late spring frost or some cold temperatures that may come in after the berries have begun to flower, then you can rake this mulch back in over the berries and protect them for a couple of nights from the late spring frost. So now's a good time, if you haven't already mulched your strawberries, to get out there and do it. Take advantage of a nice, bright, cool day perhaps in the middle of the winter, but yet one that is rather calm, and enjoy a little bit of gardening in the middle of the winter. Then another activity that you may be interested in doing right now in your garden, because it is the time of the year to do it, is to cut back the old asparagus ferns. And we'll go over here to the asparagus bed and take a look at those and give you some tips on cutting those back. Well, as you can see, the asparagus ferns have also really died back as a result of the cold temperatures we've had here in the middle of the winter. And so you may want to get a little bit of a head start on some of your spring cleanup chores by going in now and removing these asparagus ferns. In fact, it's probably a good idea to do that. And they're really easy to do with a hoe or a rake or some other type of instrument. Just go in and break those off to expose the top of the bed there. And then as you do that, just keep them laying over the top of the asparagus bed. Like mulching the strawberries, this will give you a little bit of protection from the crown, keep the soil temperatures more stabilized, so that it won't warm up quite so quickly on some of these really warm days we'll be having later on in the spring. And so you might be able to delay that asparagus from coming out a little bit. You know, one of our common problems in Oklahoma is because of some of the warm temperatures we have, we get some early emergence of some of our fruits and vegetables, and asparagus is no exception. It does like cool temperatures, but yet on those warm days in early spring, those spears are really going to pop out of there. And what's going to happen is that if you have those spears coming up, you may be getting some freeze damage if the temperature drops down at night below freezing on those early spears. And so by laying the ferns over the row like this, you will have a head start on the spring cleanup, but you'll also protect them somewhat. And then also, like we were talking about when we were mulching the strawberries, if you want to go ahead and try to get some earliness on the spears and expose that soil to the temperatures of the sun, then just rake the fern back, leave it to the side of the row, and then if the weather forecast is such that it looks like it's going to be dropping down below freezing at night when the spears begin to come out, then you can just simply rake those back over and give them some protection. And that way you may have some early spears and protect them. And one thing that I also want to emphasize is that both on strawberries and on the asparagus, before cleaning it up or before mulching the strawberries, if it's still really dry in your area like it is in many parts of the state, then go ahead and be sure that these are watered well before you mulch, and also water the asparagus bed well before you take the ferns down and lay them over the row. This will just help protect those roots and those crowns somewhat from some very hard freezing temperatures if they have been well watered and they're well supplied with moisture before you do that.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.